Redstone Bay looked calm on the surface, but the truth hid beneath its streets. The disappearances of Liam Carter, Elaine Morin, Jacob Rivers, Nora Hale, and Daniel Price seemed random until a hidden map, an underground tunnel system, and a carved triangle symbol revealed a disturbing operation. As investigators uncovered surveillance rooms, coded documents, and a secret lake container, they realized the victims were not chosen by chance. Each one had unknowingly crossed paths with a silent group moving beneath the city. Now the question was no longer who vanished, but who was being watched. Redstone Bay looked peaceful from a distance. Almost too peaceful for a place carrying a long, quiet history of missing people. The city sat between thick forests and a wide, cold lake, and most residents believed it was one of the safest places in the country. Families moved there for slower days, steady jobs, and clean air. Tourists visited in every season. Nothing about the place suggested danger. Yet something dark had been building for years without anyone noticing. The truth started to appear slowly, like faint cracks under ice. The first disappearance happened in winter, a season when the city slowed down even more than usual. A delivery worker never made it home after his night shift. His bike was found near a streetlight, still standing, untouched by the snow. At the time, police thought he had slipped away on his own. Redstone Bay was small, and people often assumed simple explanations. Weeks passed. Life went on. Then another case surfaced. A high school teacher vanished on her walk to pick up groceries. Her coat was found neatly placed on a park bench. No footprints around it matched hers. That was when a few residents began to feel something was wrong, though no one wanted to admit it. Over the next few winters, the disappearances continued. One case every year, always in the coldest weeks. The victims came from different backgrounds and had no connection to each other. A retired fisherman, a university student, a nurse who worked the night shift. Their routines were predictable, their schedules steady, yet none of them shared friends, workplaces, or paths. Local authorities tried to calm the city, calling each loss a separate tragedy. But a quiet fear started spreading among the people who paid closer attention. The disappearances lined up too neatly. The dates matched too closely. Something was shaping a pattern beneath the surface. Investigators assigned to the cases felt increasingly uneasy. They searched for any common link between the individuals who went missing, but every connection led to a dead end. It was as if someone had chosen them on purpose, selecting people who would leave behind the least amount of clues. The police files grew thicker. Family members pushed for answers. Detectives reviewed hours of security footage, hoping for a shadow, a figure, a car. Nothing ever appeared. In every case, the final minutes of each person's life inside the city remained invisible. What made the situation more troubling was the complete lack of witnesses. Redstone Bay was not a busy city, but it wasn't empty either. Someone should have seen something. Someone should have heard something. But winter always offered the same cover. Heavy snow, long nights, and quiet streets became the perfect setting for secrets. The people who vanished were swallowed by the season without leaving a trace. As the years passed, Redstone Bay started to carry an unspoken tension. Residents avoided walking alone during winter evenings. Parents kept their children close. The city still looked calm from the outside, but anyone who lived there could feel the shift. Something dangerous had made a home in the shadows, moving carefully, waiting patiently. And each winter, it returned, choosing its next name without warning. Next. The abandoned backpack in the frozen woods changed everything. Until that moment, every disappearance in Redstone Bay seemed disconnected, almost drifting in separate directions with no shared path. But the backpack pulled all those loose threads together. A forest ranger found it lying against a fallen tree, half covered in frost, the fabric stiff from the cold. The tag inside confirmed it belonged to a missing engineering student who had vanished only a week earlier. His family had spent days searching for any hint of where he might have gone. No one expected the first clue to appear miles away from his regular routes. Inside the bag, investigators found a map of Redstone Bay. At first glance, it looked like something drawn for a school project. But the longer they examined it, the stranger it became. Several locations across the city were circled in red places with no obvious importance. Old factories that shut down decades ago, warehouses near the industrial district, empty rail tunnels no longer in use. None of these spots were connected to the student. He did not work there, had no friends there, and had no reason to visit any of them. The map raised more questions than answers, but it also offered something the police had never had before: direction. Investigators split into teams to search each marked site. The first warehouse seemed abandoned, filled with rusted metal, broken windows, and dusty floors. But a closer look revealed something fresh: footprints, several sets, moving in and out of a rear entrance. They were recent, untouched by snow. Another team searching the old rail tunnels found disturbed gravel, as if someone had walked there repeatedly. In a factory near the river, a thin trail of mud led to a locked door that had been forced open only days earlier. Every location offered proof of movement, but none revealed the people behind it. The evidence made no sense. The footprints did not match shoes worn by the missing student. The mud trails were spaced too widely to belong to a single person. The disturbed gravel suggested frequent activity, not a single visit. Slowly, the realization spread through the investigation team. More than one individual was involved. Someone had mapped these locations carefully. Someone had been using them repeatedly. And whoever they were, they knew how to use the city's forgotten spaces without being seen. The team searched deeper, looking for tools, papers, or anything left behind. At the rail tunnels, they found empty food wrappers and pieces of thin wire. Inside the factory, they discovered a small patch of clean floor where dust had been swept away, forming a clear square shape. It looked like something heavy had been placed there and later removed. In the warehouse, they discovered a faint smell of chemicals, the kind used in industrial cleaning. All these signs pointed toward organized activity, not random use. What troubled investigators most was the feeling that they were always one step behind. Every marked location showed signs of recent presence, but never recent enough. It was as if someone was watching the investigation unfold and clearing their tracks just in time. The team felt the pressure rising. The map was not only a clue, it was a warning. Something larger was happening inside Redstone Bay. Something that involved multiple people moving through the city's forgotten structures with precision. The disappearances were no longer isolated tragedies. They were part of a larger design that no one yet understood. The deeper the investigators looked into Redstone Bay's forgotten places, the more they discovered parts of the city that seemed purposely buried by time. The old mining tunnels were the biggest surprise. Most residents had no idea they existed, and even the city's records mentioned them only briefly, calling them inactive structures from an early settlement period. But the tunnels were far more extensive than anyone had imagined. Their entrances were hidden behind layers of overgrown brush, loose soil, and collapsed wooden beams. When the investigation team finally made their way inside, they realized they had stepped into a network that stretched beneath nearly half the city. The tunnels were cold and narrow in some places, wide and echoing in others. Faint markings on the walls hinted at old mining routes, but those markings were mixed with newer signs. Scuffed stone, footprints in the dust, fresh scrape marks along the edges where equipment had likely been dragged. Some areas showed cleared pathways, as if someone had been using them regularly. No one on the team understood how such a large underground system had avoided public attention. The city above lived in calm routines, while an entire world beneath it operated without a sound. As the team moved deeper, they began to find evidence of recent activity. One chamber held a stack of plastic containers sealed and labeled with dates. Another chamber had been turned into a small workspace. Papers lay scattered across a metal table, weighed down by rocks to keep them from shifting in the cold air. The papers contained notes about the missing individuals, written in short, coded descriptions. Dates of disappearance. Usual walking routes. Patterns in daily schedules. Everything was organized with precision, showing that someone had been studying the victims long before they vanished. The discovery unsettled the investigators. It meant the disappearances were not spontaneous. They were planned by someone who had spent months observing ordinary people until they knew their routines better than the victims knew them themselves. Every detail had been recorded, every movement tracked. The engineering student's map suddenly made more sense. The circled locations were not random. They were access points to the underground routes these individuals used to move without detection. One of the largest chambers revealed something even stranger. Carved into the wall was a set of small alcoves filled with old surveillance equipment. Several monitors were still powered, running on portable batteries. The screens showed live feeds of areas around Redstone Bay street corners, alleys, bus stops, and park paths. Someone had built a monitoring system beneath the city, hidden from everyone above. The cameras were low quality but steady, placed in spots where they blended in with shadows or street infrastructure. Whoever controlled them watched the city's movements from the safety of the tunnels. The team tried to trace where the power came from, but the wiring ran deep into the stone, disappearing into cracks that led even further underground. The deeper they explored, the more they realized the tunnels had been modified to suit a purpose far beyond their original use. Old mine shafts had been sealed and replaced with reinforced paths. Narrow passages had been widened. Wooden supports had been replaced with metal beams. These changes were not new. They had the look of years of work. The investigators left the tunnels that day with a heavy sense of unease. They had uncovered a hidden system running beneath Redstone Bay, a world where someone had the freedom to move unseen and track residents without leaving a trace. The city above remained calm and trusting, unaware that a secret operation lived right below its streets. The pattern of disappearances no longer felt mysterious. It felt controlled. And whoever managed the tunnels had a clear advantage. They knew the city from underneath. The carved triangle in the tunnel wall shifted the investigation into new territory. It was simple in shape, but its placement was deliberate. It appeared clean, sharp, and recently etched, standing out from the older mining marks around it. Investigators photographed it and sent the images for analysis. When a retired detective examined the symbol, he recognized it immediately. It matched an emblem linked to a series of cold cases scattered across different Canadian cities over the past 3 decades. Each case involved disappearances that shared the same quiet, calculated pattern. None were ever solved. The group behind them was never identified. They were known only through this single repeating symbol. The retired detective explained that the symbol usually appeared in places far from public view, inside drainage tunnels, behind old storage units, or deep within abandoned industrial facilities. Its presence in Redstone Bay's underground network suggested that the same hidden group had moved into the city years ago. The realization shook the investigation team. It meant the problem was not limited to Redstone Bay. The disappearances were part of a larger, long-running operation that seemed to evolve from city to city, choosing new locations whenever suspicion grew too strong. Investigators returned to the tunnels with renewed focus, looking for anything else that tied the city to the older cases. They found more symbols carved at different points in the underground system, always in clean lines. Always in places that suggested the group used them for navigation or marking completed work. Some chambers contained empty crates and sealed metal boxes. Others held tools that had been cleaned and arranged neatly, as if the people using them planned to return soon. Everything was organized, yet impersonal. Nothing provided clues about identities or motives. The deeper they went, the more they learned about the group's methods. The tunnels were arranged in a way that allowed silent movement across long distances. Certain chambers had been modified with sound. Others contained leftover scraps of clothing that did not match any reported victim. It was clear the group avoided leaving direct traces, instead focusing on rebuilding and repurposing forgotten structures. Their operation was designed to disappear quickly if needed, leaving behind nothing but empty rooms and carved symbols that meant something only to them. The pattern in the documents found earlier also grew clearer. The group had been watching people months before selecting them. They recorded daily habits, timing, preferred routes, and points of vulnerability. They always chose individuals who followed routines that made them predictable. This kept suspicion low and reduced the risk of witnesses. Their planning was slow but thorough, reflecting a level of discipline uncommon in typical criminal activity. As investigators pieced these details together, they realized how easily the group had blended into Redstone Bay. The city's quiet reputation worked in their favor. Its long winters provided natural cover. Its older infrastructure offered countless hidden entry points. Residents rarely questioned abandoned buildings or sealed tunnels, and local officials had little reason to inspect them. The presence of the symbol in so many chambers confirmed the group operated with a long-term strategy. They were not transient. They had been building something beneath Redstone Bay, using the city's silence as protection. The investigators felt the weight of this discovery. They were no longer dealing with isolated disappearances or random criminals. They were facing a hidden organization that had spent decades perfecting its methods. Moving through the country like a shadow, the symbol on the wall was not just a marking, it was a signature, a reminder that the group had been there long before anyone noticed and would likely continue unless someone found a way to stop them. The frozen lake had always been a quiet place during winter, a wide sheet of ice resting at the edge of Redstone Bay. Families skated there, children played nearby, and fishermen drilled holes to test their luck. No one imagined the lake held any connection to the disappearances. But as spring approached and the ice began to thin, investigators decided to search the area as part of a final sweep. They expected nothing more than a difficult dive in freezing water. Instead, they uncovered the most unsettling evidence of the entire case. Near the deepest point of the lake, divers spotted a metal container caught between rocks. It was small, tightly sealed, and wrapped in a layer of silt. Removing it required careful effort, but once it reached the surface, the investigation team knew it was important. The container was newer than the mining tunnels, yet carried the same sense of deliberate purpose. It was clear someone had placed it there on purpose, not by accident. When investigators opened it, they found a stack of documents protected inside plastic sleeves. Each page filled with information far more detailed than anything found underground. The first pages listed names of the missing victims, each followed by timelines and personal notes. But these notes were not written from an outsider's perspective. They read more like evaluations of behavior. The documents described how each person reacted to stress, how they moved through their routines, how often they took the same route home, and whether they had friends or family nearby. The group behind the disappearances had studied their targets like subjects in an experiment. The level of detail was disturbing, and it raised a new question. Why were these specific individuals chosen? The answer appeared deeper in the stack. Each victim had unknowingly crossed paths with the group in some way. Some had taken shortcuts through areas near tunnel entrances. Others had reported unusual noises around abandoned buildings without realizing they were hearing hidden activity. A few had noticed discarded objects on their usual routes but never followed up. The victims did not know each other, but they had all come dangerously close to uncovering pieces of the underground operation. Their disappearance was not random. It was preventive. The final pages in the container were the most chilling. They contained a list titled Future Observations. The names included individuals who had never filed reports, never expressed suspicion, and had no reason to be considered involved. Yet the group had identified them as potential threats. Some were people who simply walked near restricted points. Others lived close to hidden access routes. A few were chosen without any clear reason at all, suggesting the group monitored far more residents than anyone imagined. This discovery changed the investigation's direction completely. The disappearances were not the work of a group seeking attention, money, or revenge. They were trying to protect something hidden beneath the city. The level of organization in the documents proved their operation had structure, hierarchy, and long-term goals. The metal container served as both a record and a warning, showing that the group intended to remain active for years. As news of the investigation spread quietly among officials, Redstone Bay faced a silent turning point. The city still looked peaceful, with bright homes, calm streets, and the usual rhythm of daily life. But the truth beneath it had surfaced. The tunnels were no longer just forgotten pathways. They were part of an extensive network operated by a hidden organization that saw the city as a controlled environment. The ice continued to melt, revealing the lake's dark water beneath. The investigators knew the group would not stop. They knew winter would come again. And somewhere in the city, the people behind the disappearances were already watching, choosing their next target long before anyone realized they were in danger.